Roy pushed his cleaning cart down the dim corridor, listening to the squeak of its broken wheel echo off metal walls. Graveyard shift on Station Horizon 7 meant hours of silence, broken only by the hum of life support systems and his own footsteps. He preferred it this way. No supervisors breathing down his neck, no crowds rushing past like he didn't exist. Just him, his mop, and the endless stretches of floor that always needed cleaning. Tonight felt different, though. Something in the air seemed off, like static before a storm. Roy tried to shake the feeling as he headed toward the waste disposal sector, the least pleasant part of his rounds. Nobody else wanted to clean down there, which suited him fine. Less chance of running into people. He was hauling a bag of trash toward the compressor when he heard it. A scratching sound, faint but definitely there. Rats, maybe? But stations didn't have rats anymore, not with modern sanitization protocols. Roy stood still, listening. There it was again, coming from behind the industrial compressors. "Hello?" he called out, feeling foolish. Who would be back there at 3 a.m? The scratching stopped. Roy hesitated, then grabbed his flashlight and squeezed between two massive machines. The space was tight, filled with pipes and cables that had probably never been inspected since installation. His light swept across the shadows. That's when he saw the eyes, amber, glowing, filled with raw terror. Roy stumbled backward, nearly dropping his flashlight. The thing wedged between the machines was like nothing he'd ever seen. Scales that shimmered even in the dim light. Wings torn and bent at wrong angles. A long snout with delicate features that seemed almost familiar. It was roughly the size of a large dog, trembling violently. "Easy," Roy whispered, not sure if he was talking to the creature or himself. "I'm not gonna hurt you." The creature tried to push itself further into the corner, but it was already trapped. One of its wings caught on a pipe and it made a sound that broke Roy's heart. Pain, pure and simple. Roy crouched down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. He'd had a dog once before his divorce. Same principle, maybe. Don't make sudden moves. Let them come to you. "You're hurt," he said softly. "Pretty bad by the looks of it." The creature's eyes fixed on him. Intelligence shone in those amber depths, unmistakable. This wasn't some animal. This was someone. Roy felt his pulse quicken, then it spoke. The voice was rough, struggling with unfamiliar sounds, but the words were standard. "Please," it rasped. "Can I stay here tonight?" Roy's mind went blank. A talking dragon thing hiding in his waste disposal sector, asking for shelter in broken standard. This had to be a dream. Maybe he'd slipped on the wet floor and knocked himself out. But the creature's pain looked too real, its fear too genuine. "You can talk," Roy said stupidly. "Please," the creature repeated. Its whole body shook. They look for me. I hide, please. Someone was hunting this thing. Roy should call security. Protocol demanded it. Any unidentified life form on the station had to be reported immediately. But he looked at those terrified eyes and thought about all the times he'd felt small and hunted in his own way, after his wife left. When his daughter stopped returning his calls. When the world made him feel invisible. "Okay," he heard himself say. "Okay, you can stay, but not here. Too exposed. Can you move?" The creature tried to stand and immediately collapsed. Roy saw dark blood on its scales, wounds that looked days old and infected. Without thinking, he stripped off his work jacket and wrapped it around the creature as gently as he could. It flinched but didn't pull away. "This is insane," Roy muttered, lifting the creature. It was heavier than it looked, but not impossibly so. Completely insane. Getting back to his quarters meant navigating 3 corridors and 2 service elevators without being seen. Roy's heart hammered the entire way. Every shadow looked like security. Every distant sound like footsteps. But luck held. Third shift meant skeleton crews, and most people were asleep or distracted. His quarters were tiny. Just a bed, a small bathroom, and a kitchenette. Home for the last 3 years since the divorce. Roy laid the creature on his bed, the only soft surface available. It looked even worse under proper light. Deep gashes across its body, one wing bent completely wrong, ribs showing through scales. "I'm not a doctor," Roy said, digging through his bathroom for the first aid kit. Not even close. "But I've got some supplies." He cleaned the wounds as best he could, using water and antiseptic that probably wasn't meant for alien biology. The creature bore it without complaint, though it whimpered when he touched the worst injuries. Roy found some clean towels and made a sort of nest beside the bed. "You need food?" he said, checking his meager rations. Protein bars, instant noodles, not much else. He grabbed a bar and offered it. The creature sniffed it cautiously, then took a small bite. Its eyes widened slightly and it ate more eagerly. When had it last eaten? Days, probably. Roy sat on the floor, watching this impossible thing devour his dinner. He should be terrified. Should be calling security. Should be doing literally anything except harboring an alien fugitive in his quarters. Instead, he felt more alive than he had in years. "I'm Roy," he said quietly. "What's your name?" The creature swallowed, looking at him with those intelligent amber eyes. "Lyra," it said, the word clearer now. "My name?" "Lyra." "Well, Lyra," Roy said, realizing his simple, quiet life had just gotten extremely complicated. "Welcome to my home." Lyra's eyes were already closing, exhaustion overtaking her. Within minutes, she was asleep, curled in the towel nest. The first real sleep she'd probably had in weeks. Roy watched her breathe, small chest rising and falling. He had no idea what he was doing. No plan, no backup, no clue what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time since his daughter stopped calling, Roy felt like he mattered. Like he was doing something that counted. He pulled a blanket over Lyra and settled into his chair for what would be a sleepless night of watching over his unexpected guest. 3 days had passed since Roy found Lyra, and he'd called in sick every single one. His supervisor sounded suspicious on the second call, downright annoyed on the third, but Roy couldn't leave. Lyra needed him, and somehow that felt more important than his job ever had. She was healing slowly. The wounds were closing, though she still couldn't put weight on her damaged wing. Communication got easier each day. Lyra absorbed standard like a sponge, picking up new words and phrases with startling speed. By the third morning, they could hold actual conversations. Roy sat cross-legged on the floor while Lyra perched on his bed, picking at a ration bar. She'd developed a preference for the chocolate ones, though she claimed they tasted nothing like food from her world. "Tell me," Roy said, curiosity finally overcoming his caution. "Where did you come from? How did you end up here?" Lyra was quiet for a long moment, staring at her clawed hands. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Roy's chest ache. "I am Drakesh," she said. "My people, we are gone. Our world destroyed many cycles ago. I never saw it. Born in a cage." Roy felt his stomach drop. "A cage?" Lyra nodded, her scales dimming slightly. She'd learned that humans read emotion in faces, so she'd started trying to match her coloring to feelings. Dark meant sad. Bright meant happy or excited. Right now, she looked like a shadow. "The corporate ship," she continued, words coming faster now as if she needed to get them out. "They called it a research vessel. Pretty words for prison. They kept me in a small room. Said I was a specimen, the last of something valuable." "That's horrible," Roy whispered. He wanted to reach out and comfort her, but wasn't sure if touch would help or hurt. Lyra's eyes met his, and he saw decades of pain in a being that couldn't be more than a teenager by her species standards. They did tests. Took blood-skin scales. Wanted to understand Drakesh abilities. Wanted to use them. What abilities? In response, Lyra focused on Roy's coffee mug sitting on the small table. It trembled, then lifted slowly into the air. Roy watched, mesmerized as it floated over to him and settled gently in his hands. "Telekinesis," Lyra said. "Small things only. I am young, still learning. Adults could move much more. Could do much more." Her scales brightened slightly, a flicker of pride. "Drakesh were protectors once. Guardians of knowledge. We kept peace in our sector for thousands of years. What happened?" Lyra's light dimmed again. "War, not our war. 2 other species fought and our world was between them. They both wanted our help, our abilities. When we refused to choose sides, they decided if they couldn't have us, nobody could." She looked away. 3 million Drakesh died in a single day. Some escaped, scattered across the galaxy. I don't know how many still live. Roy felt anger rising in his chest, hot and fierce. "And the corporations found you." "Found my parents," Lyra corrected. "I was just a baby. Don't remember them. The scientists said I was lucky, that they gave me food and shelter. But I wasn't lucky. I was alone." They sat in silence. Roy thought about his own loneliness, his own isolation, and realized it was nothing compared to what Lyra had endured. He'd chosen to withdraw from the world. She'd had it ripped away. "How did you escape?" he asked finally. Lyra's scales flickered with something that might have been satisfaction. Pirates attacked the ship. Wanted the research, the data. There was chaos, fighting. I broke the lock on my room during the power surge, ran, found an escape pod and launched. You stole a pod? Borrowed, Lyra said, and Roy caught what might have been humor in her tone. The pod was old, malfunctioning. Crash landed on the outside hull of this station. I crawled through a maintenance port. Been hiding ever since. 5 days with no food, 3 days with this injury. She touched her bent wing gently. Why didn't you go to security? Ask for help? Lyra's laugh was bitter. Humans see Dracash's extinct curiosities valuable. That ship had papers claiming me as legal property. Corporate law. If I revealed myself, they would just put me in another cage. She looked at Roy intently. You are the first person who saw me and asked if I needed help. Not what I was worth, not what I could do for them. You saw me hurt and wanted to help. Why Roy thought about that? Why had he helped? It would have been easier to call security. Collect a reward maybe, go back to his simple life. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe because I know what it feels like to be invisible. To have people look through you like you don't matter. You matter, Lyra said firmly. You saved my life. Before Roy could respond, his terminal beeped. A station-wide announcement scrolled across the screen. His blood went cold as he read it. Attention all personnel. Security is conducting a Level 3 sweep for unregistered biological matter detected in Sector 7. Report any unusual findings immediately. Reward offered for information leading to recovery of valuable corporate property. Sector 7. His sector. Lyra had gone completely still, her scales turning almost black. They know I'm here. Not exactly where, Roy said, mind racing. Just the general area. But they'll search every room eventually. Then I must leave tonight. You have helped enough. I won't let them punish you for my presence. Leave and go where? Roy demanded. You can barely walk. That wing won't support flight for weeks. They'll find you in hours. Better me than both of us. Roy stood up, pacing the small room. His whole life had been about staying small, staying invisible, avoiding trouble. The safe choice was obvious. Turn her in, claim he just found her, maybe even get that reward. Keep his job, his routine, his comfortable isolation. He looked at Lyra, this young being who'd lost everything and still had the strength to worry about protecting him. No, he said quietly. No, I'm not letting them take you. We'll figure something out. Lyra's scales brightened slightly, hopeful. We, Roy confirmed. He had no idea what he was doing, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't going to abandon her, not now. Not ever. For the first time in years, Roy had something worth fighting for. Someone who needed him to be brave instead of invisible. He just had to figure out how to keep them both alive long enough to matter. Roy stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering when he'd become the kind of person who harbored fugitive aliens. His face looked tired, older than his 43 years, but his eyes held something new. Purpose, maybe. Or possibly just terror disguised as determination. Behind him, Lyra was attempting to fold her damaged wing properly. She'd gotten better at hiding the pain, but Roy could see it in the way her scales flickered between colors. Someone knocked on his door. Roy's heart stopped. Lyra immediately dove into the bathroom, squeezing into the shower stall. Roy took a breath and opened the door. His supervisor, Ruth, stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. She was a heavy-set woman in her 60s who'd worked on the station longer than Roy had been alive. Nothing got past Ruth. You look terrible, she said flatly. Thanks. I'm sick, remember? Right, sick. Ruth's eyes scanned the visible parts of his quarters. Can I come in? Every instinct screamed to say no, but refusing would be more suspicious. Roy stepped aside. Ruth walked in slowly, taking in details. Her gaze lingered on the towel nest beside his bed, the empty ration wrappers, the faint scratches on the floor that Lyra's claws had left. Want to tell me what's really going on? Ruth asked quietly. Roy's mind raced. Lie. Make up something. Anything. But he'd never been good at lying. And Ruth knew him too well. I can't, he said finally. Ruth nodded like she'd expected that answer. She walked to the bathroom door and Roy's heart hammered. This was it. His job gone. Probably prison time for harboring illegal aliens. Maybe worse. Ruth opened the door. Lyra stood in the shower, scales dark with fear, making herself as small as possible. The two females locked eyes for a long moment. Well, Ruth said eventually, That's not what I expected. Lyra spoke, her standard much improved but still accented. Please don't hurt him. Roy only helped. I made him. Made him? Ruth raised an eyebrow at Roy. She made you? No, I chose to help, Roy said firmly. She was dying. What was I supposed to do? Ruth closed the bathroom door and sat heavily on Roy's bed. She was quiet for so long that Roy felt dizzy from holding his breath. Finally, she spoke. My son would have done the same thing, would have helped without thinking about consequences. Her voice cracked slightly. He died doing something stupid and brave. Rescued workers from a mining accident when he should have waited for professionals. Ruth, I'm sorry, I didn't know. She waved him off. That was 20 years ago. Point is, I see him in you right now, and I hated him for being reckless, but I was also proud. She looked at the bathroom door. She can come out. I'm not calling security. Lyra emerged cautiously. Ruth studied her with a professional eye. Drakesh, right? Thought your kind was extinct? Almost, Lyra said quietly. Ruth nodded slowly. The corporate agents arrived this morning. 3 of them, led by some ice-cold scientist named Dr. Weston. They're claiming a lost specimen, offering rewards, making threats, the whole package. She looked at Roy. They'll search every room within 48 hours. Roy felt his stomach sink. So it's over? Not necessarily. Ruth pulled out her tablet. Cargo freighter called Wandering Star docks tomorrow for resupply. Leaves in 36 hours heading to the outer colonies. Captain's name is Petra. She's not picky about passengers who can pay or work. You want us to run? I want you to survive, Ruth said. Both of you. That Weston person isn't going to stop. Whatever research they had planned for your friend here, they're not giving it up. She tapped her tablet. I can falsify a manifest, get you on that ship. But after that, you're on your own. Lyra stepped forward. Why help us? You risk much, Ruth smiled sadly. Like I said, you remind me of my son. Both of you. Besides, I'm retiring in 3 months anyway. What are they going to do, fire me? She stood. But you need to be smart about this. The agents have scanners. If they detect Drakesh biosigns near the cargo bay, it's over. How do we mask them? Roy asked, working on it. Environmental suit with lead lining might do it. I'll have one ready by tomorrow night. Ruth headed for the door, then paused. Roy, once you leave on that ship, you can't come back. Not to this station. Maybe not to any corporate station. You understand that? Roy looked at Lyra, at this young being who'd already lost so much and was still fighting to stay alive. Did he understand? Yes, did he care? Not as much as he should, I understand, he said. After Ruth left, Lyra sat beside Roy. You don't have to do this. I can try to reach the ship alone. With a broken wing and half-healed wounds, you'd be caught in minutes. Better than ruining your life. Roy laughed, surprising himself. Ruining my life? Lyra, I clean floors on a dying station. My ex-wife hasn't spoken to me in 2 years. My daughter sends me a message on my birthday and that's it. I spend my days invisible, my nights alone. What exactly am I giving up? Lyra's scales brightened, curious. You have a daughter? Helen. She's 22 now. Smart, beautiful. Everything I'm not. Roy felt the familiar ache. She stopped talking to me after the divorce. Said I gave up on the family too easily, that I didn't fight for us. Did you fight? No, Roy admitted. I just let it all fall apart. Let my wife leave. Let my daughter walk away. Told myself it was easier that way. He looked at Lyra. But helping you doesn't feel easy. It feels right. Maybe for the first time in years, I'm actually doing something that matters. Lyra touched his hand gently with her clawed fingers. The gesture was foreign but kind. You matter, Roy, not because of what you do, because of who you are. They sat in comfortable silence until Roy's terminal beeped again. This time it was a personal message. He opened it and felt his blood turn cold. Attention station personnel. Dr. Weston and security teams will be conducting mandatory room inspections starting tomorrow at 0800 hours. All residents must be present for inspection. Failure to comply will result in immediate detention. 24 hours. They had 24 hours before the hunters came knocking. Ruth said 36 hours until the ship leaves, Roy said. We need to stay hidden for 12 hours after they search this room. Where can we hide for 12 hours on a space station? Roy thought hard. The maintenance tunnels were too obvious. Storage areas would be searched. Then it hit him. The waste processing plant. Nobody goes there unless absolutely necessary. It's automated, smells terrible, and it's in the sector they already searched. We hide in garbage? We hide in the last place they'd look twice. Roy started packing his few possessions into a bag. We can't take much. Need to travel light. Lyra watched him pack, scales shifting through various colors as emotions played across her face. Roy, are you scared? He paused, considering the question honestly. Terrified, but also more alive than I've felt in years. He smiled at her. Funny how fear and excitement can feel so similar. The next 24 hours would determine everything. Either they'd make it to the wandering star and escape, or they'd be caught and separated forever. Roy had spent years choosing safety over risk, isolation over connection. Not anymore. This time he was choosing to fight, choosing to matter. Whatever happened next, at least he'd finally be living instead of just surviving. The inspection went exactly as planned, which meant it was awful. Roy stood in his quarters while Dr. Weston poked through his belongings with gloved hands, face pinched with disgust at the modest living space. The scientist was tall and thin with cold gray eyes that seemed to catalog everything they touched. You live alone, Mr. Roy? Weston asked, not bothering to look up from scanning Roy's bathroom. Yes, sir. No pets? No roommates? No unauthorized guest? No, sir. Just me. The scanner beeped as it passed over Roy's bed and his heart nearly stopped. But Weston just frowned at the reading and moved on. Ruth's lead-lined cleaning solution that she'd had Roy spray everywhere must be working. You called in sick 3 days in a row, Weston said, finally making eye contact. Feeling better? Much better, sir. Food poisoning. Bad ration pack. Weston's smile was thin and sharp. How unfortunate. You should be more careful what you consume. The words felt loaded with meaning. If you see anything unusual, anything at all, you'll report it immediately, yes? Of course, sir. After they left, Roy waited exactly 10 minutes before slipping out. Lyra was hidden in the waste processing plant exactly where they'd planned. She was curled behind a massive recycling unit, wearing the environmental suit Ruth had provided. The lead lining made her undetectable to scanners, but it also made her look like a strange, bulky human worker. They're gone, Roy whispered. We have 12 hours until the ship leaves. Did they suspect? I think Weston suspects everyone, but he has no proof. Roy checked his watch. Ruth said she'd meet us at Cargo Bay 3 at 1900 hours. We need to stay out of sight until then. The hours crawled by. Roy tried to rest, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. Every sound made him jump, every shadow looked like security. Lyra was calmer, or at least better at hiding her fear. She spent the time teaching Roy words in her language, simple things like hello and thank you and friend. At 1830, Ruth's message came through. Change of plans. Security increased at all cargo bays. Meet me at Maintenance Corridor 7. I'll get you there another way. They moved carefully through the station's service areas, staying off main corridors. Roy had worked here long enough to know every back route, every blind spot in the security cameras. Lyra followed close, her movements much smoother now that her injuries had healed. They were halfway to the meeting point when the alarm sounded. Red lights flashed. A mechanical voice echoed through every speaker. Security alert. Station lockdown in effect. All personnel report to nearest checkpoint for verification. No, Roy breathed. No. What does it mean? Lyra asked, scales darkening with fear. It means they know. Somehow they know we're moving. They ran. No more stealth, no more careful navigation. Just pure sprint through the corridors. Behind them, Roy heard the whine of security drones activating. The station's automated systems were hunting them now. This way. Roy yanked Lyra into a side passage that led toward the industrial sector. It was a longer route but less monitored. They had to jump over pipes, squeeze through narrow gaps between machines. Lyra's environmental suit caught on a sharp edge and tore. She yelped but kept moving. A drone rounded the corner ahead of them, its scanner light sweeping the corridor. Lyra didn't hesitate. She focused, and the drone suddenly jerked sideways, slamming into the wall hard enough to crack its casing. Sparks flew and it dropped to the floor. I thought you could only move small things, Roy panted. Apparently fear helps, Lyra said. They burst into Maintenance Corridor 7 to find Ruth waiting with another woman Roy didn't recognize. She was tall, muscular, with short gray hair and a face that had seen too many fights. This is Captain Petra, Ruth said quickly. She's willing to take you both, but we need to move now. Security is sweeping this sector in 5 minutes. How did they know? Roy demanded. Bioscanner trace, Petra said. her voice rough like gravel. Someone got smart and checked recent energy signatures. Found a Drikesh reading in the waste sector from 3 hours ago. She looked at Lyra. Your suit's torn. That's not helping. They ran again, this time following Petra through a maze of maintenance tunnels that even Roy didn't know existed. The captain moved fast for someone her age, barely breathing hard even at full sprint. They emerged in a cargo transfer bay that smelled like fuel and recycled air. Petra's ship, the Wandering Star, sat in dock position, loading ramp down. It was smaller than Roy expected, scarred with old repairs and mismatched panels. Get aboard, Petra ordered. I'll handle. Nobody is going anywhere. Dr. Weston stepped out from behind a cargo container, flanked by 6 security officers with weapons drawn. His cold smile widened as he saw Lyra. There you are, Specimen 742. You've caused quite a lot of trouble. Roy stepped in front of Lyra instinctively. She's not a specimen. She's a person. She's corporate property, Weston corrected, legally acquired and registered. You're committing theft, Mr. Roy. That's 15 years minimum in a corporate prison. He looked at Ruth and Petra. And you two are accomplices. I suggest you step aside and let us reclaim what's ours. She's not yours, Ruth said firmly. I checked the legal codes. That research vessel's collection license expired 4 months ago. Any specimens acquired under that license are void of corporate ownership under Galactic Sentient Rights Law, Section 47, Subsection 12. Weston's smile faltered. That's absurd. We had proper documentation. Had being the operative word. Ruth held up her tablet. I contacted a friend in the Galactic Rights Commission. Your company never renewed the collection license. You're holding her illegally. For the first time, Weston looked uncertain. One of the security officers lowered his weapon slightly. Sir, if the license is expired, the license is valid, Weston snapped. This woman is lying to protect criminals. I'm not lying, and I have proof. Ruth transferred the data to Weston's tablet. His face went pale as he read. Lyra stepped forward out from behind Roy's protection. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. I am Drikesh. My people knelt to no one when we ruled the stars. I will not kneel to you now. I am not property. I am not a specimen. I am Lyra, last daughter of a murdered world, and I choose my own path. Her scales blazed bright gold, and Roy felt a wave of warmth and strength wash over everyone in the bay. It wasn't just her words. It was something deeper, something powerful that made everyone stand a little straighter. Weston raised his weapon. If I can't have you, neither can they. Security Chief Harris appeared from the other entrance, his own team behind him. Dr. Weston, lower your weapon. I've reviewed the documentation. The Drikesh is right. You have no legal claim. This is corporate territory. It's a neutral station under Galactic Charter. Harris interrupted, which means Galactic law applies. Lower your weapon or I'll detain you for threatening a sentient being. The standoff lasted an eternity of seconds. Then Weston lowered his weapon, face twisted with rage. This isn't over. My company will file appeals, press charges. Good luck with that, Petra said cheerfully. Come on, kids. We're leaving. Roy and Lyra hurried up the ramp. Ruth stopped at the bottom, smiling sadly. Take care of each other. Come with us, Roy said suddenly. You said you're retiring anyway. Come with us, Ruth shook her head. My place is here. But you two? You go find where you belong. She looked at Lyra. There are rumors, you know, about Drikesh survivors, a hidden colony out in the outer veil. Might be worth looking into. Thank you, Lyra said softly. For everything. The ramp closed. Within minutes, the Wandering Star was undocking, leaving Station Horizon 7 behind. Roy watched through a porthole as the station shrank into the distance, taking his old life with it. Lyra stood beside him, scales bright with hope and fear and excitement. What happens now? Now? Roy smiled. Now we figure out where we're going, together. Life aboard the Wandering Star wasn't comfortable, but it was free. Roy learned to sleep in a hammock strung in what Petra generously called the guest quarters, but was really just a converted storage bay. Lyra preferred perching on the exposed pipes near the ceiling, her natural instinct to find high ground asserting itself now that she felt safe. The crew was small. Besides Petra, there was Davis, a quiet engineer who seemed to communicate mostly in grunts and nods, and Yuki, a young woman who handled navigation. and somehow made terrible coffee taste drinkable with creative additions. Roy worked to earn their passage, taking on whatever jobs Petra assigned. Cleaning, inventory, maintenance work. Nothing glamorous, but it felt good to be useful. Lyra helped in engineering, where her resistance to extreme temperatures meant she could repair things while the systems were still hot. Davis actually smiled when she fixed a cooling unit that had been broken for months. They'd been traveling for 2 weeks when Roy finally worked up the courage to message his daughter. He sat in the mess hall staring at the blank message screen, trying to figure out what to say. How do you explain to your child that you've abandoned everything to protect an alien refugee? Helen answered the call looking annoyed, then surprised. Dad, where are you? I tried reaching you at the station and they said you quit. Not quit exactly. More like permanently relocated. What does that mean? Roy took a breath and told her everything. About finding Lyra, about running from corporate agents, about leaving on the freighter. He expected anger, disappointment, another lecture about his life choices. Instead, Helen was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard in years. You did that? You actually stood up to them? I had to. She needed help. Dad, I spent my whole childhood watching you back down from everything. Mom, the landlord, your boss, everyone. You just took it. Helen's eyes were watery. I was so angry at you for not fighting for us. But you fought for a stranger. She wasn't a stranger by then. She was a friend who needed me. Can I meet her? Roy looked up to see Lyra hovering in the doorway, curious. He waved her over. Helen, this is Lyra. Lyra, my daughter, Helen. Lyra's scales shifted to a warm blue, friendly and open. Hello, Helen, your father speaks of you often. He says you are brilliant and kind. Helen laughed, tears on her cheeks now. He's biased. But thank you. She looked at Roy. Dad, I'm still mad about a lot of things, but I'm also proud of you. Maybe for the first time. After the call ended, Roy felt lighter. Not fixed, not healed completely, but better. Lyra sat beside him, her presence comforting. Your daughter loves you, she said simply. Yeah, I think maybe we'll be okay. Eventually. Captain Petra called them to the bridge a few days later. She had information. Got a lead on your people, she told Lyra. Talked to an information broker at our last port. Apparently there's a hidden Drakesh colony out in the Outer Vale region. Lyra's scales blazed bright. How many? Broker said about 200 survivors. They've got a settlement on some uncharted moon called Silvervale. But here's the catch. The location is protected, hidden by some kind of psychic barrier. Only someone with Drakesh blood can navigate to it. I can find it, Lyra said immediately. I can feel it already. Like a pull, getting stronger the further out we go. Then that's where we're heading, Petra said. But I should warn you both. The broker also mentioned that Weston's company put out a serious bounty, 50,000 credits for Lyra's return. We might have company on this trip. She wasn't wrong. The first bounty hunters showed up 3 days later at a refueling station. 2 rough-looking men tried to corner Lyra in the cargo bay. Roy was there to witness what happened when she got angry. One man reached for her and suddenly found himself floating 3 feet off the ground, unable to move. The other pulled a weapon and it flew from his hand, disassembling itself piece by piece in midair. Lyra's scales were pure crimson, her eyes blazing. I am not cargo, she said, voice resonating with power. I am not a prize. I am Drakesh, and you will leave. Now. They left, stumbling over themselves to run. After that, Petra posted guards whenever they docked, but the hunters kept coming. Word had spread. A live Drakesh was worth a fortune to collectors, scientists, anyone who wanted to study the last of a supposedly extinct species. The 4th attempt was the worst. 3 ships ambushed them in open space, trying to disable the Wandering Star's engines. Petra was a skilled pilot, but she couldn't shake them all. We're taking hits, Davis reported. Hull breach in Section 4. Roy felt the ship shudder. Lyra was in engineering, helping Yuki with damage control. He ran toward them, fear driving every step. If they were boarded, if someone got to Lyra. He found her sealing the breach with her bare hands, scales glowing white-hot as she fused the metal together. Her abilities had grown stronger during the journey. Stress and necessity were pushing her to new limits. I've got this, she told him. Help Yuki with the power distribution. They fought for hours. Petra pulled maneuvers that had Roy's stomach in knots. Finally, they managed to jump into faster-than-light travel, leaving the hunters behind. The crew gathered in the mess hall afterward, exhausted and battered. Two of them voted to turn Lyra over at the next port. The bounty was tempting and the danger was real. Petra silenced them with a look. We don't abandon family. And that's what we are now, whether you like it or not. Anyone who can't live with that can leave at the next station. The two crew members left at the next port. The rest stayed. They'd decided that some things were worth more than money. Weeks turned into months. They traveled deeper into uncharted space, following Lyra's instincts. The stars looked different here, ancient and strange. Sometimes Roy saw structures floating in the void, massive and inexplicable. Remnants of Drakish civilization, Lyra explained. Her people had been here once. Space itself felt different. Colors more vivid. Time slightly off. Roy's watch ran slow, then fast, then gave up entirely. Yuki said it was quantum interference from old Drakesh technology still active in the region. Then one day, Lyra rushed to the bridge, scales blazing every color at once. There, that direction. I can feel them. My people. We're close, Petra adjusted course. They passed through what felt like a wall of static, and suddenly space changed. A moon appeared on the scanners, lush and green and impossible. It hadn't been there a moment before. Silvervale? Lyra whispered, tears streaming down her face. 3 Drakesh ships appeared, organic and beautiful, like crystals grown into spacecraft. They were massive, dwarfing the wandering star. A voice came over the communication system, speaking in Lyra's language. She responded, voice shaking with emotion. The conversation went on for several minutes. Finally, Lyra turned to Petra. They want us to land. They'll escort us down. The moon's surface was breathtaking. Forests that glowed with bioluminescent light, crystal formations that sang in the wind, structures that grew from the ground rather than being built, architecture that blended seamlessly with nature. And Drakesh, dozens of them in all sizes and colors gathering to see the new arrivals. A larger Drakesh approached, her scales deep purple with age and wisdom. She spoke to Lyra, who broke down crying and threw herself into what Roy could only describe as a hug. My sister, Lyra managed to say in standard. This is Kira, my sister. I thought I'd never see her again. The reunion was beautiful and heartbreaking. Roy stood back, watching Lyra be welcomed home by people who'd thought her dead. He felt Petra's hand on his shoulder. You did good, the captain said quietly. I just gave her a place to stay for a night. You gave her a lot more than that. One of the elder Drakesh approached. Roy. Through Lyra translating, they offered him something unexpected. They want to know if you'd like to stay, Lyra said, eyes hopeful. You and any of your crew. They offer sanctuary to those who protected me. Roy looked at Petra. She smiled and shook her head. Not my path. I'm a wanderer. But you? She looked at him knowingly. You've been looking for home your whole life. Maybe you just found it. The decision should have been harder. Roy stood at the edge of the Drakesh settlement, looking out at bioluminescent forests that seemed to breathe with life. Behind him was the wandering star, ready to leave whenever Petra gave the word. Ahead was something he'd never had before. A real choice about his future. You don't have to decide right now, Lyra said beside him. Her scales were still bright with joy from reuniting with her sister and her people, but worry flickered through them when she looked at him. What if I don't fit here? Roy asked. I'm just a janitor. What do I have to offer? Kira approached, moving with the grace of someone who'd lived centuries. When she spoke, her standard was perfect, though her voice carried harmonics that made Roy's chest resonate. You protected our youngest when she had nothing. You risked everything for a stranger. That speaks to character we value above all skills. Over the next few days, Roy explored the settlement while Petra's crew resupplied. The Drakesh had built something remarkable here. Technology and nature existed in perfect balance. Buildings grew from living crystal, powered by something Lyra called harmonic energy. Gardens produced food that tasted like sunlight. Everything felt alive and connected. The Drakesh themselves were endlessly curious about him. They'd seen humans before, but never one who'd chosen to help rather than exploit. Children followed Roy around, asking questions in their musical language that Lyra translated with amusement. On the third evening, Roy used the settlement's communication hub to call Helen. She appeared on screen, eyes widening as she took in the impossible view behind him. Dad, where are you? Somewhere that's not on any map, Roy said. The Drakesh colony. We found them. He told her about the journey, about the settlement, about the choice he was facing. Helen listened without interrupting, something she'd never done before. "Are you happy there?" she asked finally. Roy thought about it. "I think I could be. For the first time in years, I feel like I matter, like I'm part of something bigger than just existing." "Then stay." Helen smiled, though tears were forming. "Dad, you spent my whole childhood being invisible. Be visible for once. Be happy. What about you?" "I'd be so far away." "You've been far away my whole life, even when we lived in the same house. At least now you'd be distant for a good reason." She wiped her eyes. "Besides, Lyra promised to teach me about Drakesh culture. I can visit sometimes, right?" Kira, who'd been quietly listening, stepped into view of the camera. "Your daughter would be most welcome. Any family of Roy is family to us." After the call ended, Roy found Lyra sitting by one of the singing crystal formations. She was running her claws gently over its surface, creating harmonies that sounded like wind chimes. "I talked to Helen," Roy said. "And?" "She told me to stay." "Be happy," he sat beside her. "But I keep thinking about that first night. You asked if you could stay just for one night. And I said yes. Now you're asking me to stay forever." Lyra's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a warm gold. "You gave me shelter when I had nothing. Let my people give you the same." "You belong here, Roy, I feel it." "We all do." "I'm scared," he admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if I disappoint everyone? Then you'll be like everyone else who lives and tries and sometimes fails." Lyra's claws found his hand, gentle despite being sharp. "You taught me that it's okay to be afraid. That being brave means doing things even when you're terrified. You were brave for me. Be brave for yourself now." Roy watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that Earth never produced, purple and gold and something that didn't have a name in any human language. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll stay." Lyra's scales blazed so bright he had to squint, and she made a sound that was pure joy. Other Drakesh nearby felt her happiness and echoed it, creating a wave of celebration that rippled through the settlement. Petra left the next morning. She gripped Roy's shoulder firmly, eyes knowing. "You made the right choice. Maybe the first really right choice you've made in years. Thank you. For everything. Thank your friend there. She's the one who reminded me why I do this job. Some cargo is worth more than money." Petra grinned. "Besides, now I can say I helped establish first contact between humans and Drakesh. That's gotta be worth some good stories in bars." The wandering star lifted off, disappearing into the sky. Roy felt a pang of loss watching it go, but also relief. He'd made his choice. Now he had to live it. The Drakesh gave him a dwelling of his own, a small structure that grew from the ground at his request. It was simple. Just one room with a sleeping area and space for his few possessions, but it was his. The first place that had truly been his in years. They also gave him a role. Keeper of stories, they called it. Roy's job was to preserve history, both human and Drakesh. The elders would share their memories and he would record them. In exchange, he taught young Drakesh about human culture, about Earth and its peoples, about the complicated and beautiful mess that was humanity. 6 months passed like a breath. Roy fell into routines that felt natural rather than forced. Morning walks through the glowing forests, afternoons in the library, recording stories that went back thousands of years. Evenings teaching classes to curious young Drakesh who wanted to understand the strange humans they'd heard about. Lyra visited him often. She'd grown in confidence and power, training with the elders to develop abilities she'd never known she had. But she always made time for Roy, bringing him meals when he forgot to eat, sitting with him while he worked, sharing comfortable silence. Helen visited twice, staying for weeks each time. She and Lyra became close, sisters in spirit if not blood. The settlement welcomed her warmly, and several young Drakesh developed what Roy could only describe as crushes on his brilliant daughter. One evening, almost a year after he'd arrived, Roy sat outside his dwelling watching the stars. Lyra settled beside him, her wings now fully healed and magnificent when spread. "Do you have regrets?" she asked quietly. Roy thought about his old life. The empty quarters on Station Horizon 7, the loneliness, the feeling of being invisible, unimportant, just taking up space in a universe that didn't notice him. "No," he said honestly. "I miss Helen, but we talk more now than we did when I lived a jump away. I miss Petra's terrible coffee. But regrets? No, I regret nothing either," Lyra said, "except perhaps waiting 5 days to ask for help instead of finding you sooner." Roy laughed. "You were terrified and injured. You get a pass." They sat in comfortable silence, watching other Drakesh and the few humans who'd joined the settlement move through the twilight. It was a small community, maybe 300 beings total, but it felt whole, complete. "You know what's funny?" Roy said. "I spent 20 years cleaning floors thinking that was all I was good for. Now I'm preserving the history of a species everyone thought was extinct. How did that happen?" "You were always capable of this," Lyra said. "You just needed someone to see you." "Really see you?" Her scales brightened with affection. "That night you asked me my name, you didn't see a specimen or a curiosity. You saw a person who needed help. That's rare, Roy, that's precious. You saw me too, just a janitor, and you trusted me with your life. Because you asked if I was okay instead of what I was worth." Lyra's wings stretched out, draping gently over his shoulders. It was warm and soft and felt like being wrapped in starlight. We saved each other. Other Drakish began gathering in the central square for the evening harmony, a nightly tradition where the community sang together. The sound was indescribable, voices blending into something that felt like pure emotion made audible. Roy still couldn't join in properly, his human voice too limited, but they'd taught him simple harmonies he could manage. "Come," Lyra said, standing and offering her claw. "Let's sing." Roy took her hand and they walked together toward the gathering. A year ago he'd been invisible, alone, convinced his life was over at 43. Now he was part of something bigger, something beautiful, something that mattered. He thought about that night in the waste disposal sector, a scared, injured dragon asking a lonely janitor if she could stay for just one night. One night had become forever, and Roy couldn't imagine wanting it any other way. As the harmony began, Roy closed his eyes and added his voice to the chorus. He was home. Finally, truly home. Not because of a place, but because of the people who saw him, valued him, chose to keep him. Lyra's voice rose beside his, bright and beautiful and full of joy. Their voices twined together, human and Drakesh, creating something new. Something that had never existed before and would never exist again. In the distance, through the bioluminescent forest, crystal spires sang in response to the harmony. The whole settlement seemed to breathe with life and connection and belonging. Roy opened his eyes and saw the stars overhead, brilliant and infinite. Somewhere out there, Helen was looking at the same stars, proud of her father for the first time. Somewhere, Petra was telling the story of the janitor and the dragon in some distant bar. Somewhere, Ruth was retiring peacefully, knowing she'd done one last good thing. And here, on a hidden moon at the edge of known space, a middle-aged human janitor had finally found what he'd been looking for his entire life. A place where he wasn't invisible. A place where he mattered. A place where someone had asked him for shelter, and in giving it, he'd found his own home.